have to mentor the younger people who are coming up through the ropes. It is good to be part of a Barbados Labour Party administration that has people like Dale Marshall representing St. Joseph in the rural areas, and the next person who I'm going to bring to the stage, George Payne as well, who represents St. Andrew. Because these are the individuals who are at the forefront, and people like Cynthia Ford and St. Thomas, who are at the forefront of being able to mentor Charles in relation to his stewardship of what is to come in the constituency of St. John. We can only be as good as sometimes the people who help to show us the way forward in order to represent you, the people of this constituency. And you see, the next speaker I'm going to bring to the stage, George Payne, is a man that I have tremendous respect for. When he is present, he makes his presence felt on every single member of the Barbados Labour Party. He is always willing to give his advice and his guidance. He's going to tell you when you are going wrong. But you know what? You can always expect sincerity from George Payne. And one of the things that George Payne has shown me over the course of the last couple of years of his representation of St. Andrew is that he is prepared to defend his constituents to the bitter end. He can speak in the same way that Charles can speak about the neglect from a Democratic Labour Party administration towards the people of these constituencies in the rural areas. And it seems as though sometimes the people in the rural areas are being victimized at the hands of the Democratic Labour Party administration. The only difference between Cynthia and Dale and George is that they are Barbados Labour Party members who are representing those areas. But St. John does not have an excuse because you had the Queen. You had the former Prime Minister's wife as your representative. And still, all of you continue to say that you have either not seen her, you have not gotten the level of representation that you deserve, and now on the eve of an election, they intend to thrust at you whoever they may. But I want the people of this constituency to understand that people like George Payne, who I'm going to bring up here now, is a gentleman of the highest class. He is able to direct and command the troops, giving support to the leader of the Barbados Labour Party to be able to take this country forward. And together with this team that we have of combined individuals who have leadership abilities, who have demonstrated their experience, and certainly being able to have a passion to be able to serve, I say to the people of this constituency of St. John, give Charles Griffith the opportunity to continue to be mentored by people like George Payne. Charles Griffith, you have served this country well. You have been a proud son of the soil of St. John. When I look at the things like the Project Oasis that you have been instrumental in bringing to the fore in this country and ensuring that young people have been able to get off of the block, that young people have been able to pursue their dreams. You have served at the macroeconomic level, but you have also served at the community level. You have engaged your people. And I believe that you can only get better by having the caliber of people like George Payne in St. Andrew to be able to hold your hand and to walk with you in communities in St. John to be able to bring home the seat for the Barbados Labour Party. So I want you to welcome on stage the chairman of the Barbados Labour Party, the senior of the Barbados Labour Party, George Walton.
Ryan Strawn, Wilfred Abrams, Dr. William Duguid, Ralph Thorne, Tyrone Lovell, Kerry Simmons, candidate Adrian Medic Ford, and party leader Mia Amor Motley.
For a minute, I wasn't sure who she was speaking about, but I had to settle, and finally, when she called the name, I knew that she meant the chairman of the Barbados Labour Party. I never expected that I would have been here addressing the meeting at this time. I had a bet with Jerome Walcott in I think it was in September last year. And the basis of that bet was that by March, Mia Motley would be the Prime Minister of Barbados. That was my bet. Jerome actually said that the Prime Minister would have been chosen by then, but I felt that the election would have been in December. I shudder to tell you what was my side of the bet. But I could not believe that a Prime Minister could keep a country in waiting for this long. And Jerome's bet was that if the election is not called, or rather if in March the election is not called, he would make a proposal to Mara Thompson to marry her. My side of the bet was $10,000. But Jerome was hoping that she would refuse the bet. It so happened that, as you know, the election is called at this time. And I'm waiting to see after the election what Jerome will do. Because in any event, he is hoping that Mara would refuse his proposal. You could imagine Jerome and Mara Thompson walking up the aisle. What an odd couple. I spent a long time in the constituency in the 2011 and the 2011 by-election and the 2013 general election. And I must say that we were somewhat shattered by the results of those two elections. We were shattered because while we expected that the Democratic Labour Party would have won the election, we never expected that we would have lost by that margin, to be honest with you. This is the second occasion in a week that I have addressed a meeting in St. John. And those of you who would have been at the first meeting would recall that I indicated that we had the wrong Griffith. But seriously, notwithstanding the results of those two elections, I am predicting that Charles Griffith will be the Member of Parliament for the constituency of St. John whenever the election is called. It is going to be a shock victory. I must tell you that people are so fed up with the people of St. John. I've canvassed with Charles. Sometimes I wonder whether or not the people are fooling me, to be honest with you. Because most of the areas that I have canvassed, I would say 60%, 30% is the highest that we could get for the candidate for St. John. I've canvassed in more than one areas, and on occasions, what I have done is that I have canvassed by myself, so that I wouldn't be misled into the people fooling me because Charles was there. So I have to be guided by what I have seen, and I'm telling you that come whenever the election is called, Charles Griffith will be elected to the House of Assembly as a Member of Parliament for St. John. I will tell you a little bit about that later. I will just say that here again, Jerome is a betting man. I've never seen him in Marhill Street, but he is a betting man. And his bet to me was that if Charles win, he would spend a whole night naked on the top of Elara Court. Well, I am waiting. I hope that he carries out that bet. But there's a wind of change going through the entire Barbados. And that wind of change in St. John, seriously. You've heard the previous speakers speak about the credentials of Charles. Charles is an amazing candidate, no two ways about it. When we started this campaign, we never thought. We knew that Charles had won the nomination, but we never thought that Charles was such an excellent candidate. You only have to hear him speak. You only have to engage him. You only have to hear people speak about him. You only have to hear his students. And when I talk about his students, the people who he mentored on the basketball field, the youth, the young people that he has dealt with, and you would think that they're speaking about a saint. And as I said before, he has this presence. He has a presence that when you see him, if you don't know him, you have to ask, who is that gentleman? So, ladies and gentlemen, the wind of change that I'm speaking about has been bolstered by the inclusion of Charles into our ranks. It has been like a breath of fresh air to the people of St. John. A candidate who has lived and worked among you for his entire life. A candidate who understands the passion of the people of St. John for good, honest governance, a comfortable standard of living, and above all else, a pride in their heritage. A candidate imbibed with a yearning from his elementary school days to represent this constituency and by extension to serve this country at the highest level. Like the successful coach and manager, that was his want. He secretly crafted his political journey to ensure that he was well grounded in the community. Visibility was kept to a minimum. Emphasis on teamwork, commitment, perfection, and excellence ensured that he was always singled out by his charges as the man for any challenge. The man for any challenge. Tonight, we are witnessing another page in the chronicles of his biggest challenge to date. But what is responsible for this wind of change? It is a contradiction to the historical political leanings of this constituency, but it is rooted in the betrayal and disrespect by a political operative in the person of Mara Thompson that was thrust on the people of St. John who were caught off guard in the aftermath of the mourning of their favorite son. And it was not just once, it was twice. Now when you look at it, Mara Thompson, a woman who the people of St. John knew very little about, contested an election in this constituency. I know Barbadians love foreigners. They love foreigners. They love people with accents. They love people from far and away. And we embraced her. The people of St. John embraced her. Can you imagine that Errol Barrow contested a seat in this constituency, having lost in St. George in 1958, and he won a seat. He won his seat by 50%, with 50% of the vote. Errol Barrow, 50.05% of the vote. In other words, he barely won. He barely won. He was re-elected under the double-member constituencies, 34% in 1961, 36% in 1966. But can you imagine that the people of Barbados, the people of St. John, embraced Mara Thompson so well that she got 89% of the vote in 2011, sorry, when she contested the seat in this constituency. 89%. 89% of the vote in this St. John constituency. She won on the backs of the goodwill of Errol Barrow and of the sympathy of her husband. You can imagine that, 89%. Nowhere in the history of Barbados has anybody won a seat with that percentage majority, 89%. A record. The other side only got 11%. As a matter of fact, that doesn't even necessarily follow, because if there are more than one person in the ring, obviously that 11% would have been shared with among them. But she got 89% of the vote. But there is something called gratitude. There is something called gratitude. And a person should be grateful to the persons who have placed them in a position where they never expected. If somebody do you a favor, you should be at least a little grateful to them. At least a little thank you. You should show some sort of appreciation for what they have done for you. The people of St. John was very, very, very grateful to Mara Thompson. She did not even have the decency to thank the people of St. John. Not the decency to thank the people of St. John. And what she did immediately after the election was also an insult to the people of St. John. An insult to the former Representative Errol Barrow and also to her husband. As far as I'm concerned, they were not, as far as I know, they were not divorced yet, even though they probably might have been planning to. But Mara Thompson, in her first speech after she won that seat, she indicated that her major plank of representation in the constituency was to bring development. Hear this? To bring development to a long neglected parish. She won a seat that was held by two former prime ministers, including her husband. And she could come and say immediately after that she wants to bring, as one of her major promises to the constituents, she wants to bring development, which would tend to suggest that there was no such development in that constituency before. Now, I must tell you that you have seen her within the past few weeks, and you have seen the shunning of Mara Thompson by her colleagues. But this shunning of Mara Thompson started since 2013 after that election. Her cabinet colleagues was so annoyed. You heard them in the recreation room. They indicated that they would not have anything to do with her. Nothing to do with her. Because she brought some disappointment to most of them in the manner in which she treated the Right Excellent Errol Barrow and her husband. So this Mara Thompson actually began her dismissal of the parish of St. John not in 2018, not a few months ago, but long before what you are witnessing in the past few weeks. So, ladies and gentlemen, the other throwing disappointment in Mara Thompson, the manner in which she dismissed her earlier statement with respect to her denial that she did not plan to run in the upcoming election. I mean, one would have thought that the least she could have done was at least to consult her constituents. She did not even have the decency to have a meeting with her constituents to declare that she was no longer interested in running in this constituency. A woman who had been elected by such a large majority did not even have the decency to come back to her constituents to tell them, well, look, I do not think that I would be available for whatever reason to be your candidate for the next election. That was disrespect. Total disrespect. So, ladies and gentlemen, all of that is in keeping with the attitude of the Democratic Labour Party with respect to their lack of caring for the constituents that they represent. We have seen the lack of caring. This is the Scotland district. St. Andrew forms part of the Scotland district. And we have seen the lack of caring by the Democratic Labour Party after the debacle in Whitehill. A complete village being wiped out, and the Democratic Labour Party having absolutely nothing to do with the residents of that area. And the situation is so serious in Whitehill that if a major catastrophe occurs to the bottom of the roads, which more or less have been rendered impassable, it means that the people of Whitehill would be marooned. Immediately after the floods in 21, or rather the bits of bad weather on the 21st of November, the Minister of Public Works came without actually doing any estimate, without actually listening to anybody, and he declared that the people of Whitehill should have been removed. But you know, in the Barbados Labour Party, towards the end of our term, we had set up the Scotland District Authority. And the Scotland District Authority was charged with the responsibility of managing the type of problems in the Scotland District, which includes St. John, that would have solved that problem. And even though we had sent out tenders with respect to certain works that were to be done, the Democratic Labour Party dismissed all of the work that was done by the Barbados Labour Party in that respect. And today, we do not have the type of authority, the type of statutory entity which would deal with the type of problems that the people of Whitehill faced. And it is a sad episode in the history of parliamentary representation when you could see an entire district being neglected to the point where land had been acquired for housing for people in situations like this. And the Democratic Labour Party, under the Minister of Housing, Dennis Kelman, utilized those lands for commercial purposes, and the people in Whitehill are still in a dire need of resettlement. But let me get back to Charles. Charles Griffith has represented this parish well in many respects. As a youth ambassador, he spent about 20 years in the Ministry of Youth Affairs, and his entire life has been towards the youth and towards the community in this constituency. He has served in almost every youth organization in this constituency, and has been president of quite a few. This constituency has had 2 prime ministers. And as the previous speakers had said, there's very little that you in this constituency, the people in this constituency, have to show for that representation. As chairman of the Barbados Labour Party, I believe that I will have some influence to bear whenever the election is over. I believe that I would be able to convince the Prime Minister Motley. You hear that, Prime Minister Motley? Saying that the people of St. John have been accustomed to having representation at the ministerial level. I believe that the talents of Charles Griffith should be represented in any cabinet of Barbados. I know that some of you might be worried and might tell yourself, why elect Charles Griffith? We had 2 prime ministers, and there are certain things that we did not get, we hadn't got done. And if you elect Charles Griffith as a normal member of parliament, it would even be worse. But I would like to give you the assurance that Charles Griffith will serve in a cabinet of Barbados under Mayor Motley. He has the experience. You have running against him, although I do not know exactly which one. You have 2 individuals who have served as aides to the prime ministers. None of the prime ministers, David Thompson and Arabara, saw fit to name in a cabinet. You know that one of them, Mr. McLean, he sent. David Thompson sent him to Canada. And as soon as he got to Canada, as soon as David Thompson, as Friend Stewart came in, he called him back. Pilgrim has been there scruffing around for a long time doing absolutely nothing. Nothing. For 5 years, he has been there doing absolutely nothing. I want to assure the people of St. John that the talents of Charles Griffith will not be missed, and that he will serve in the cabinet of Mayor Motley whenever the election is called, whenever the election is over, but you have to do your part. In order to get him in the cabinet, you have to ensure that you vote for him whenever the election is called, so that we will be able to have Charles Griffith as part of our team. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been a good audience. We would hope that we see the success of Charles come to fruition whenever the election is called. Good night, thank you, and God bless.